As per the popular demand from many of you all who have polled in the YouTube community page, here's the video on currency swaps. And some of you all are going to be asking, what's the difference between cross-currency swaps and currency swaps? The answer is they are identical. There's absolutely no difference between cross-currency swaps and currency swaps. Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're interested in a career in fund accounting, corporate actions, trade life cycle and OTC derivatives, then subscribe to my YouTube channel because I provide content-rich, research-centric videos on these topics. Smash the notification button if you want to be notified of the latest videos and polls that I provide, which sharpen your knowledge on many of the aspects that could be asked at interviews at some of the global investment banks like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, etc. Swaps are OTC derivatives. Okay, so the term that is used to describe OTC derivatives are swaps and other structured products. Like every derivative instrument, it is based on an underlying asset. All right. So, like you have futures which are based on either equity futures which are based on the underlying asset of an equity instrument, or you have index futures which are based on index underlying as the underlying asset. Therefore, even swaps have underlying asset. Okay. The term swap means in finance an exchange of cash flows, all right, between two parties. The swaps could be interest rate swaps or currency swaps. Now, in interest rate swaps, I've already uploaded a video on interest rate swaps. It's a swap of different types of interest payments. And a currency swap, on the other hand, there is also an exchange of the principal amount that needs to be converted at a locked in currency rate. These OTC derivatives are structured between two banks, or a hedge fund and a bank, or an institutional investor and a swap dealer, so that it is beneficial to both the counterparties. A swap has to be monetarily beneficial to both the counterparties, or else there would be no motivation for any of the counterparties to get into the swap. Okay, so therefore, remember the features of swaps. They are OTC derivatives, they are not listed on any exchange, they are structured products, they're not standardized products, they are made to meet the requirements of both the counterparties to the trade. And in the US markets, all swaps have to be settled through the GTCC because they act as the central clearing counterparty. A currency swap has a principal amount which is in different currencies. Okay, this is the main ingredient of a currency swap. There are two currencies involved, and because there are two currencies involved, each currency has its own interest rate, and therefore there is also an interest rate exposure. So, for a party to a currency swap, there are two exposures: interest rate exposure as well as currency exposure. Let's say, for example, Hari Hedge Fund, which is my favorite hedge fund, wants to do a swap of USD 5 million, and it enters into a swap deal with a company called Galaxy Inc., which has a equivalent exposure of euro 4.5 million. Okay, so the underlying asset is currencies. All right, so like or derivative is based upon an underlying asset. Over here, the underlying asset is a currency pair. And because every currency has its own interest rate, automatically interest rates will be also taken into consideration. So over here, Hari Hedge Fund has got 5 million USD. So USD has its own interest rate. Galaxy Inc. has its own equivalent of euro. So EUR has its own interest rate. So there will also be an interest rate conversion factor. All right. The currency exchange rate is locked because the game is between interest rate fluctuations and currency fluctuations for the interest payments. All right. So, as I already mentioned, the currency swap has to be beneficial to both the counterparties. If it's not beneficial to any of them, They will just not enter into the currency swap. And hence, understand this aspect very important, that when the principal is exchanged on the start date of the swap, on the maturity of the swap, the exchange rate is locked in. Okay? And therefore, there is no FX risk at the time of reconversion of the currencies back, which takes place at the end of the swap. Let's try and understand the concept of a swap with this example. Let's say there is a company, there's a hedge fund called Hedge Fund, which has a loan of USD 5 million. All right? That it has borrowed from its bank. The interest rate is about 2%, and Hedge Fund is based in the United States. It has taken a loan of about 5 million USD at an interest rate of 2% from its bank in US. The interest that is paid to its bank is also in USD, so therefore the principal amount and the interest amount are in the same currency. Both the loan payments and interest payments are in the same currency, that is USD. But Hedge Fund has a peculiar problem. Even though it has access to USD funds, it wants to invest in the European markets. If it wants to invest in the European markets, it needs EUR, which is the currency of the Eurozone. But there is an FX risk. Every time Hedge Fund, which has taken a loan of $5 million or has an investment of $5 million, has to convert that USD into EUR to be able to invest in EUR markets. This is the FX risk that Hedge Fund has. For every investment it makes at different points of time, it has to convert each of those dollars into EUR. It's not going to make a one-time investment of 5 million, right? It's going to convert maybe 1 million, after 6 months another 2 million, and maybe after a couple of years 3 million, etc. So therefore, there's a different amount that is concerned over here. And therefore, there is a significant FX risk at this point of time for Hedge Fund. So Hedge Fund has a competitive advantage in USD markets. That means, what do we mean by competitive advantage? Students of marketing will understand the meaning of competitive advantage as advantage not only over your competitors, but on a significant aspect of one of the factors of production. Okay? So in marketing, we say, or in strategy, we say that competitive advantage is not just having an advantage over your competitors, but you're having a competitive advantage in one significant aspect over its partners. In finance, that competitive advantage comes from reducing costs. Okay? So in finance, whenever we think about how businesses succeed, how companies succeed, how they do so well in their weighted average cost of capital, is because they are able to significantly reduce their cost of production. That is their competitive advantage. Competitive advantage for Hedge Fund is to borrow in USD at 2%, but if it was to borrow USD in the Eurozone, the cost would be higher, which is 2.5% per annum. Therefore, for Hedge Fund, it would make more sense to borrow in USD in US because it's got a competitive advantage in the dollar market in United States for multiple factors. On the other side of the transaction, let's say we don't know, the transaction hasn't happened yet, but there is a company called Galaxy Inc., which has a loan of EUR 5 million. And its interest rate of EUR is 3% per annum. The USD EUR exchange rate is about 0.9550. Galaxy Inc. has to pay to its bank interest in EUR. Okay, so both the loan amount and the interest amount are in EUR. But Galaxy Inc. needs USD, and every time it has to convert EUR into USD because it invests in the US markets. This is the FX risk for Galaxy Inc. every time it converts its EUR into USD. But Galaxy Inc. has a competitive advantage in EUR markets. If it borrows in EUR in Eurozone, it's 3%. If it borrows in EUR in US, it's 4%. So the competitive advantage is in the Eurozone borrowing of EUR. And hence, it's very important to understand competitive advantage. Investopedia has called it the factors or characteristics that permit one company to compete more effectively than its industry peers. In finance, competitive advantage could be revenue maximization, cost reduction, aspects, geographical maximization, etc. So these are competitive advantages of specific companies. So to sum up the table, Hurry Hedge Fund can borrow in USD at 2%, in Eurozone at 2.5%. Galaxy Inc. can borrow at 4% in the US markets, in euros, and at 3% in the Eurozone. So what's the competitive advantage? The competitive advantage is for Hurry Hedge Fund to borrow in USD at 2% and for Galaxy Inc. to borrow euros at 3% because they're looking at minimizing their costs of borrowing. All right? A swap is therefore an exchange of cash flows. A side of a swap trade is called as a leg of a swap. And the payment frequency happens at the time of the leg of the swap. Okay? Now, Hurry Hedge Fund has USD, Galaxy Inc. has EUR. So they're borrowed in the currencies in which they have a competitive in markets and in currencies in which they have a competitive advantage. Now they have to swap the trade. In comes an investment banker like JP Morgan, Goldman, or Morgan Stanley, which facilitates the swap between Hurry Hedge Fund and Galaxy Inc. Hurry Hedge Fund has USD, it wants EUR. Galaxy Inc. has EUR and it wants USD. Four essential features of every swap. There is an underlying instrument. The underlying instrument could be interest rates or currency swaps because a swap is a derivative instrument. The principal amount is also called as the notional amount, and this principal amount in a currency swap gets exchanged and re-exchanged at the same rate. So there's no FX risk in the re-exchange of principal amount. There's a exchange of cash flows which is also netted off, and this happens at predetermined frequencies. There is a receiver and a payer in a swap, not a buyer or a seller. So now what happens on the start date of the swap? Hurry Hedge Fund gives what it has, right? So Hurry Hedge Fund has $5 million. It gives it to Galaxy Inc. because Galaxy Inc. needs USD. What is the second swap that takes place? Simultaneous swap. Okay, this simultaneous exchange takes place where Galaxy Inc. gives the equivalent of $5 million. All right. So Galaxy Inc. checks up on the Bloomberg screen what is the USD EUR rate. They find out that the USD EUR rate is 0.9550. It converts $5 million into euros and it gets 4.775 million euros, which it then gives to Hurry Hedge Fund. All right. What about the coupon payments? Galaxy Inc. now has USD, right? So it must pay USD interest rate to Hurry Hedge Fund, right? That means there is an FX risk involved. Since most of the revenue streams for Galaxy Inc. are not in USD, it has to get the euro converted into USD. The FX risk over here is the strengthening of the dollar, in which case Galaxy Inc. has to give more EURs to be able to pay Hurry Hedge Fund. Hurry Hedge Fund has to also give Galaxy Inc. EUR as the interest. Over here, is there any FX risk? Yes, There is an FX risk over here because for the coupon payments, there is definitely an FX risk because Hari Hedge Fund is using euros. It has to pay in euros, but it's earning in dollars, and therefore it has to convert the USD into euro. So there is an FX risk over here for Hari Hedge Fund as well. On the end, so this happens at every leg of every coupon payment. So if it's a 3-year swap and it's 6 monthly payments, they'll have an FX risk, 6 times, right? At the end date of the swap, Galaxy Inc. returns back $5 million to Hari Hedge Fund. And Hari Hedge Fund returns back the equivalent of the same amount of euros that it has got. The swap has now ended. The swap is beneficial to both the parties, Hedge Hedge Fund and Galaxy Inc. I'll be uploading a video on the mathematics of the swap. This is just the example of how the swaps work. Thank you everybody for watching into this video. Keep learning and keep growing with me, Sushila Hariharan. Thank you.